Shut up and sit down.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the backyard. It is another episode. It has been a while since we have done an episode, but we have got a good one today. I am interviewing a friend of mine for a long time, and the title of the episode is The Truth Behind Local Media. And what we wanted to do was talk to you about some of the ins and outs of local media, mostly television and radio. Disclaimer, this is not a shit on the media episode. We are not going to bash people. We are not going to bash the media. If you want to do that, simply go to the comment sections of any Facebook story that a media posts, and you can see all the dimwits that want to bash the media. So this is not a shit on the media. This is an insight into what the media actually does, and how maybe you could respect it a little more because you find out what they do. So I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's meet our guest, and let's get this thing rolling. All right, so folks, here he is, the guest of the day, our first guest in a long time, Mr. Reid Kerr, all the way from, now I will preface this, this is YouTube. We can pretty much say anything within reason. Please tell the people where you are located right now so I don't have to.
Thank you, Coleman. I live in just across the river south of Cincinnati on the Kentucky side, in a little area in Boone County that is called Sugar Tit, which is one of the three funny places in this county. So I figured if I have to live in Kentucky, I at least want to live somewhere that makes people laugh. So yeah, that's how we wound up here.
For those of you who are deaf, that's Sugar Tit, Kentucky.
Tit. Yes.
Sugar Tit, Kentucky. Okay, so I wanted to talk to you about the truth about local media. And I prefaced this in the beginning, in the intro. I don't want to shit on the local media because I know what goes into it. But that's just me. Mm-hmm. Reid Kerr, you can shit on the local media if you want because you're a guest and you live 2,000 miles away and no one's going to get mad at you. I'm the designated
shitter, basically. That's what I'm called in for.
Yes.
All right.
But I wanted to give people kind of an insight to especially local media. Let's leave the national people out of this because that is a whole nother ball game of a lot of stuff. Right. So give me real quick your local media background when you were down here in Texas.
Okay. Unlike you, I didn't really mean to wind up in television. I always tell people that I got into TV the way that some people get into telemarketing. I just needed a job, and it happened. I started in radio, and I worked in East Texas in radio for 10, 12 years, something like that. And the news director at the station where we both worked was a big fan of my radio show. He would occasionally call it, which is odd. But we'd become friends, and I called him. I was in a bad radio job, which was most of them. And I just called him to see if I could still use him as a reference. Yeah. And he said, actually, I've got a reporter job open if you want to talk about it. And I told him, I said, because I went to lunch with him and he told me what the job was going to entail. And I told him, and this is going somewhere. It's leading up to my utter lack of qualifications for the job that I did for 20 years. And I said, Kenny, I appreciate this, but I'll be honest with you. I just want you to know, I know you've heard my radio show, and it was a sports talk radio show. It was like 2 hours of guy talk, basically.
Come on, name the station. Name the station.
The station was it was KTBB, which was AM 600 at that point.
Yep, and they actually now have several. That radio group has several affiliates. KTBB still in existence today, so they've got several different frequencies.
They flipped some frequencies, but anyway, I go to lunch with the news director, and I tell him, I say, Kenny, I just want you to know that I know you've heard me and seen my writing and done all this, but I have never taken so much as a journalism class in my life. And I said, if I get this job, I may go to the local junior college here and take some journalism classes. And he just kind of smiled, and he didn't say anything. He looked across the table at me and he said, that's not as important in our profession as you might think it would be. And so he was right. I was hired on after 12, 13 years in radio. I was hired on to do television. I was the last reporter in at the ABC affiliate in Tyler, KLTV. And so I worked the weekends. And the people who were hired around me, I came from radio. My degree is in computer science, which is not quite useful. The people hired around me, one of them was a marketing major. Stephen Parr was, I think, marketing also, or English, and he became, a #1 weather guy in Shreveport. So we weren't. They could teach you to write, and they could teach you to tell the stories that they wanted you to tell in the time frame they gave you, and it was not a journalism background kind of thing that you had to have. It wasn't hard news, I guess you'd say, filling time. It was more of how do you tell the stories. So I came on then. And over the next, that was 2001, and then over the next 8 years, I guess, maybe 9 years, I worked at the station I started as a reporter, and then I moved to sports eventually. It was a sports reporter and anchor, just like you were. And I left and came back because I can't learn. I should be able to, but I just can't. I actually worked at KLTV, counting college and after college. I worked there 4 different times. So I have a lot of experience in one area of town, I suppose. But I was a reporter and anchor there for, I'd say, 8 years. I went back into radio, and I'm actually coming up on close to the 10-year anniversary of getting out of that also. But I spent 22, 23 years, something like that, doing radio and TV in that area.
Now, the funny part is, television is fickle, kind of. He said, I worked with a lot of people the same. They didn't go to school for television. In fact, you find a lot of people who don't, but they were pretty good storytellers. They were pretty good on camera, and they could at least they had a functional knowledge of the English language, which is about all you really need, right? You don't have to be a novelist. The funny part is when Reid was reassigned within the station, I was the one who took his job.
Yeah, you took my desk.
I was the one who took his job.
And you took my desk and the broken door in the sports office that I smashed that day.
I had been down in Lufkin, Texas, working for about 1.5 years, and the same news director who hired you said, he's moving to a different role. You're going to replace him. And it was not a question. It was this is what's going to happen. So I didn't know Reid at the time. I didn't know I was taking his job, which happens a lot in television. You're just told, move along, or someone else is coming in. So I get up to Tyler, and Reid and I have this super awkward, like, pass the torch, bro. Do you remember that on the air? It was your last day on the air, and it's going to be my first. So we're both on the screen together. And I don't know if we meant to fist bump, but one of us went to high five and we finger pistol.
The high five or potato. It happens all the time when you don't rehearse these things. But yeah, I remember that. It was kind of calling in the reliever on me. Yeah.
Yeah. And so for some reason, we decided that was a good idea. But that gets to my point about television. You are replaceable. And news directors will find a reason to replace you if they want you gone. I'm not saying Reid did a terrible job. I'm saying they replaced him. They said, here's an opportunity. You take it. That's it.
Yes, that's it. The same thing happened to me on the other side of that. I became, and this is among the 3 dumbest things ever to happen in my 20, somewhere close to 25 years of radio and TV. I became what they call the web J. And our news director had the idea that it would be kind of like my radio show, and that it would be, I was basically going to be live in the newsroom all day, every damn day.
It was like 10 hours, right? Or 8 hours of live streaming?
It was from 9 o'clock in the morning to 6. With I think a half an hour for lunch. It was one of the soap operas came on, and I got to get out of there. But,
and see, here's the deal. If that were now, nobody would have blinked an eye. But in
Yeah,
2009,
it
we
was
didn't
ahead
think
of its
that
time.
we didn't think people would accept that in 2009. What are you going to do for 10 hours or 8 hours a day? What content are you going to cover? In fact, I think you were audibly asking those questions on the air. I have no idea what I'm supposed to do.
When I started, okay, the idea, and I agree, it was behind its time.
Yes.
It should have happened now, but it just, and now I don't know if you need it because everybody has access to that.
Yeah.
But the idea was, I'm in the newsroom, I'm in a corner of the newsroom, and I am there to talk about the stories that are coming up. I'm there to interview the reporters who are coming back in. This was Social media was all around. We had Facebook and Twitter and all that, but we were
I had
still
a
trying to
MySpace
drive
account.
it. Yeah, we had my face and all that. So we were trying to drive it with that. And when we started this thing, it was just a desk. It was a desk that had, like, I think, been in the Photog Lounge. It was not a new desk. They put a camera in front of me and it gave me a switcher to turn on and off, and that was it. I
That was
couldn't
it.
show video.
Nope.
I couldn't even do interviews the first day. And somebody with our corporate sponsors, rayconmedia.com, took pity on me and bought on eBay the equipment that I needed to show video out of our servers, so I would at least have some kind of content. And you would come by and I'd interview you. I would try when Taylor Henderson would come in the afternoon, I could get him going, and he was about 5 feet away from me. So I knew if I was funny, I would at least have laughter in the background, that sort of thing. But it was, but back to your point, I didn't want to do that. I was just told, you're going to do that. I found out about that. There was a big meeting. It was and this will kind of give you background on what it's like being in the local media. I know you guys think that we, make big bank and we drive our convertibles home to our pools and we play with our solid gold dogs and all that. No, not even close. I found out that I was leaving sports and going to this new thing that no one had ever seen before or come up with an idea for before, because about 3 minutes before the meeting, where our news director announced to the entire newsroom that this was going to happen. And also this was about late 2009. So he also worked in all the things that had happened because of the recession and all the people that we were not going to replace and how everybody's job got a lot harder. He announced that I was leaving sports and going to the WebJet. I found this out, the entire concept of this, I had found out 3 minutes before because I bumped into him in the men's room at KLTV. He told me. I didn't even have time to tell Maya, who I was working with in sports, that I was getting out. The first time she heard it was when she walked into the meeting. So it was awkward because I didn't, but that's the kind of, rock solid stability you have where suddenly my job turns into something that does not exist until I make it. And you have to leave Lufkin and, hope you enjoy leaving the place you've been for years and moving up to Tyler, because plan B is getting out of the business completely.
That was one of the things I hope people got out, watching this, was you never knew anything until it was happening.
Oh, no.
At least in my experience, I remember, and we'll get to, I wrote down a couple of things we're going to cover here on my sticky note.
Extensive notes. I like that.
Yeah. But one of the things all the time, if a salesperson would poke in the sports door, we knew they were about to say, we just sold something. You're required to run it. It starts tonight. And this could be at 9:50. And, I remember, I won't name names or anything, but I remember them doing that like on a Wednesday or a Tuesday before our first Red Zone, going, by the way, we have sold like 4 sponsored segments. You have to run them. Sorry. Yeah. And you don't understand. This happens all the time. The last people to know are the people who have to implement the changes, especially when it comes to money and dollars spent by advertisers. It's insane.
It is. And one thing about it is that, and I've always said this because it's been true wherever I worked. I've worked in the communications industry.
Sorry, I had to turn my light on.
Nice. I've worked in the communications industry for 20 something years, and there is no industry worse about communication than that.
It's tough.
We went from a single anchor show on the weekends on Saturday and Sunday
Yep.
to a 2 anchor show.
Yep.
Mid 2000s.
Who was doing those shows? Do you remember names?
Our weekend anchor found out because this other person showed up and told us that's what she was doing. Didn't have any idea that her job as weekend producer and anchor was split in two until this person showed up. And they're like, who is this? And oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, she's your new co-anchor.
Yeah.
Enjoy making up that chemistry. So.
Okay, so there's one truth right there. You don't know nothing until you know it. The other truth is you are expendable. And the reason you are expendable is because of money. Folks, the truth about local media and money is there is none. I'm going to quote you some numbers here, and you're going to shit the bed when you realize how little I made, but I thought I was rich. So my first job was at Channel 9 in Lufkin. This would have been September 2007. And my first contract was a 3-year deal for $20,000, $20,500, and $21,000. My first paycheck, $714.41. $714.41. I'll never forget those numbers. I wish I'd have photocopied it and plaqued that sucker. But living in Lufkin, my apartment was like $350, had a handful of bills. I was single. $1,400 a month was a lot of money, to me at the time. And then I'll tell you, that was September of 2007. From then until when I got out in October of 2013, I think I had one more raise, and it wasn't that much.
Yeah.
But folks, you go in and you think you're going to make this big bucks, and there are people who make lots of money. There are people in local markets who make good money, but if you're not in a big market and you're not established, you're not making a lot of money. That's just the honest truth. And I think that scares a lot of people away. I see so many people drop out of media after a year or two because it's just fiscally impossible to make it sometimes. It really is. Do you remember your first dollars?
In terms of radio or TV?
Either.
Okay. Radio, I started in radio in my hometown of Carthage, one of several hometowns, but that's where I graduated. Yeah. That's where I met the first future ex-Mrs. Me. And I worked at the AM radio station there, KGAS, the second most embarrassing call letters in the country. Thank God for KMU. I was there when it was an AM station only, and I got minimum wage, which was $3.35 at the time after high school graduation, for a bunch of years. I don't really recall. I would eventually worked up a little bit, but that's just the kind of market that, like you said, if you go big market in those days, there was money available. If you stayed around somewhere because you liked it or because it was your hometown or whatever, there really wasn't. When I got to television, let me see. I was working in radio, and I want to say that TV wise, my first deal was about like 24 a year. Not good. I mean, I was married. We didn't have a kid. I was married. My wife worked, but that was it. Now the thing is, you and I, as the weekend guys, my bee keeps sleeping out. How TV is that? You and I believe, were the only sports guys in that market who were getting overtime, because the other two stations, CBS station and NBC station, they were paying even less, and they weren't paying overtime that I can remember.
So when I first moved to Channel 7, I was salaried. I was not getting overtime. I was getting comp days. And then they did kind of a fiscal restructuring, and I was moved to an hourly rate. They prorated me to an hourly rate, and then I qualified for overtime. But here's the catch, folks. You qualify for overtime, but then the managers have a sneaky way of saying, why don't you come in at like 4 o'clock today instead of 1 o'clock? Because that saves them 3 hours. Hey, I need to work overtime this Friday. Yeah, no, you don't. Like, just because you qualify for overtime doesn't mean you get overtime. And that was kind of sneaky too, because when my boss at the time, Ryan Peterson, would go on vacation or to Cowboys camp and I was working 12, 13, 15 days consecutively, there were days that I didn't go in till like 7 o'clock at night because they didn't want to pay me the previous 5, 6, 7 hours of that day. And I just simply ran stuff that was available on the wires because that was a way they'd rather pay me for 3 or 4 hours than they would for 8 or 9 hours. Hey, that's the truth. That is the truth about how that works.
Yeah, it's the truth, and you don't really have anything that you can do about it either.
No.
When I was working, I would always get overtime, and like once or twice a year, they would realize that I always got overtime, and they'd shut everybody down. That's it. They would just, you would work all year long, bringing in overtime, and we're not talking about padding hours or anything. We were part of a sports department that was 2 people and covered like from almost Dallas to almost Shreveport, basically.
Yeah, 25
and we had to
counties,
have stories every
like
day,
that.
all the time, everywhere, and you had to go get it. And if you were the only one there, like I was when Coleman won, Michael Coleman left. When Coleman left for Long Island, he left, I want to say it was February. It was right. My last story with him before he left was talking about was Adrian Peterson's recruiting. So that gives you a time frame on this. But he left soon after that, and they didn't know who else to hire. I had just started in sports, so I really wasn't a viable sports director candidate at that point. I worked for, I want to say it was like 14 weeks as the only member of the sports department. And the news director at one point came to me, and he was either worried about his budget or because, me on overtime, I still didn't make as much as being a sports director.
Yeah.
He said, try to keep it to 60 hours a week. I'm on the air 7 nights a week. I work 70 hours a week, most of that. And, if you work 40 hours and then 30 hours of overtime, the paycheck actually starts to look okay, but you don't sleep. You're literally the only person there. Everything that got done had to be done by me, edited by me, put on the air by me. I had to be in every newscast at the time.
Yep.
It's people, the jobs that I've had in my life, radio and television, those jobs, people love to talk about those jobs, and they remember you from those jobs, as you know, and it looks glamorous. And it's in some small ways it is.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I miss working with people like you and the newsroom atmosphere and having the pulpit, basically being able to get out there and do goofy and funny stuff. But the conditions, like you said, there's a lot of people that get into it and then get out of it. And we call those the smart ones, because when things happened it was about 10 years ago. It was after the recession, the previous recession. And at that point, kind of the powers in charge sort of took that chance to rewrite everything and actually make the rules worse. So at that point, you came here, you spent time in Lufkin and then moved up. We had people who would work in like Lake Charles and then come to Tyler. I'd been in radio forever, and I had to be the weekend reporter for I think 2 years before I ever got to get on the sports desk. That market was basically like AA ball in minor league terms. It's not your first stop, but it's not where you're going either. Well, now you see people right out of college who like have their graduation announcement, and then like 3 days later, it's like, I've been hired in Tyler as a reporter. It just, everything got pushed down a level when that happened, and they took advantage of that to make the job harder. I mean, it was very hard on me and the people that I worked with, and we usually, not in sports because we were our own department in sports, but as a reporter, you had a photographer who went with you. You had a pro with the camera who knew what they were doing, who would set up the shots while you were getting the interviews and then put it all together for you. Now, almost everybody is what we call one-man bands, which is you shoot it, write it, edit it, voice it, everything. It's all you. They're dealing with that now. They're dealing with having to, having to tweet about it and post it on their Facebook pages or the station's Facebook page. Everything that they're doing, it seems glamorous from the outside, but then again, a lot of things do, and they are really not.
See, and I didn't mind not making a ton of money because I was still able to get by. I wasn't married yet. I didn't have kids yet. I was living a fairly inexpensive life. And I'll be honest, for folks like me who have a little bit of an ego, it is a job that it is going to stroke that ego, especially when you worked at the #1 station and you were seen by a lot of people in the market and you were very recognizable, which I was, right? And I wasn't even on air the most, right? Ryan Peterson, who was my sports director, was on air twice as much as I was. We were both very visual in the community. So if you were somebody who enjoyed that, television is a hell of a drug because you were going to get that. You were going to go places and people were going to recognize you. But that comes with some flaws and some inherent dangers because people know who you are. And we weren't quite yet in the social media world when I was there where like everybody's just was filming everything. But we had some incidences around town where some television people got in trouble. And it was because they were on television. And so it is a hell of an ego stroke. And I had it for a long time. Like I enjoyed being seen in public and people saying, hey, we watch you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it was fun for me doing what I did. Looking back now, I don't know that you can raise a family. It's very hard, pardon the shadows, raising the family and all that, because like you said, the schedule was just absolutely brutal. If you were a weekend guy like Reid and I, you work Saturdays and Sundays. Kiss your ass goodbye to your family on the weekend. Sorry.
That's it. I mean, there's no, if you don't, you have to beg somebody else to cover for you. And the sports department,
they don't want to do it either.
2 people. Right.
And
if you're not getting overtime, if you're getting a comp day, every time you get a comp day, it's because you're working for him, and then he gets a comp day when you take yours. It's a vicious circle. In local media,
especially on the weekends. And my wife.
You need to go. Did she catch you?
No. She's just watching. So hi, honey. So, but like on the weekends, I would work probably from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. if it was in the fall and ABC had Saturday night football. So your local colleges were playing at like 11 a.m. So you'd have to be at those games. So you were probably working like 9 a.m. to probably midnight. Because by the time the local game got through, or by the time the ABC national game got over with, it was probably 11. Then 30 minutes for the show. And by the time you cleaned up and went home. So your life was completely dedicated to that. And Reid, this is what people don't understand. You work 12 hours a day for about 5.5 minutes of on-air time.
Yes.
There are a lot of things you can do in 5.5 minutes that were more enjoyable than that. And you worked your ass off for 5 minutes of airtime.
Yes, and if you broke it, and on the weekends, I was lucky to get 5 minutes, and we would get 4 minutes on Sunday, and I had to kind of stretch my legs and relax on Sunday.
Yeah.
But if you talk about the local colleges playing on Saturday. Well, maybe you have a local game in Tyler that is only 5 minutes from the station. Well, you also may have a game in Kilgore, which is a half an hour, or Athens, which is 45 minutes.
Yep.
Or something huge in Corsicana, you got to come in early for and drive an hour and 10 minutes or whatever. It doesn't happen in your backyard. The driving is a huge part of it because, again, a lot of times you're the only one there. When I was the reporter on the weekends, which is that's like the coal class. That's the first job you get. You come in, you check the voicemails to see if there's anything huge breaking. You go over the arrest reports to see if anybody you know has been arrested.
What you can recap on Friday.
Yeah, you're the only one there, and you're the only one there on Saturday, and the only one there on Sunday. Everything that happens in that newscast is you, and you have to put all of it together so somebody else can write it later. You said something about being recognized, and that was the kind of thing that I did not like.
Really?
Well, here's the thing. When I got recognized a bit for radio, because obviously nobody knows what you look like on radio. So if somebody actually recognized my name or heard my voice or something, and they came up to me and said, I had a lot of people would come up to me in radio and tell me something that I had said that they enjoyed, they thought was fun. That meant a lot to me because I know they were listening. In the situation that you and I were in, where sports was a local afterthought, especially if it wasn't football season, people would just say, hey, I saw you on television. Just affirming basically that I do work on television, and they can verify that. They would never say, hey, that was a great thing that you showed the other night. I love that story. It was, you're getting recognized at Walmart all the time by people who vaguely have seen you. It's like Chuck Klosterman said this about reality TV show people. You're famous at a level where the money and the power do not come along with it. You're just sort of famous. You're famous in a small town, as the saying goes. You will spend the rest of your life in that market getting recognized at Burger King. But you will also be the kind of guy who does it.
7 years
but when you're on TV, you're also the kind of guy who makes enough money that you have to eat at Burger King. So that's where you are. And that I was off of television for I left in 2009. I did 2 years of radio, and then like 4 or 5 years, and I would still have people at the store, say, hey, saw you on the air the other day. I'm like, is the news in reruns? Because at this point, I'd run my hair out. I'm like, man, who's letting me? This is self-defense. Nobody can put me on television with this. You're slap your TV really hard, sir. See if you can get it back to the present tense.
All right, so I'll be cognizant of your time here because you are in a different time zone than I am. I did not realize that Kentucky, your part was in the Eastern time zone. Yes. So it is dark behind me now because it's 9 o'clock Central. Right. So it's 10 o'clock Eastern time. So a couple other things. So what have we learned?
Right. And in Kentucky, it's 1956. So you really got to watch out for that too.
Easy there, Trigger. So what have we learned? You're expendable. You don't know shit until it happens to you. You get no money. The schedule sucks. You do get recognized.
Right.
Plus.
Good or bad.
So let me ask you this, because I was thinking about this the other day. With the state of the current media in now, how did you deal with people who hated you? Because inevitably, you didn't cover somebody's game who you were supposed to. And you touched on it earlier. Ryan Peterson and I, 2-man department responsible for like 25 counties. When it was fall football season, there were like 140 teams playing. Mm-hmm. Inevitably, you didn't cover the game you were supposed to, and somebody was pissed off about it. And I was cleaning out my closet the other day, and I actually found a handwritten letter somebody sent expressing their disgust for KLTV Sports. And I do believe I wrote back and I said, thanks for watching. But let me tell you this, folks, and let me make this as clear as human fuckingly possible. The television stations do not have meetings in the morning and the afternoon and go, what are the stories we can run today that's going to piss everyone off? How do we do that? Yes. Those meetings, that does not happen. There are no meetings where people go, how do we push a narrative that everyone is going to hate? I know we should do this. And yet somehow people think that happens.
People, I think, especially now, and my last TV and radio ended like August of 2001, I think, and I'm very happily retired. But like I said, we had social media. We had websites, we had Twitter, we had Facebook, we had all of that. And it was a component of what we did. It was not the majority of what we did, which is where we are now.
Yeah.
And I think, back then, when I started in radio, if you hated me, and many of you did, you had to write a letter, like you said. You had to write it out in your crazy handwriting and put a stamp on it and hand it to another human being and have him walk it to the radio station, which is another good reason to always start with an air name and not your actual name. And there are some people who are going to hate you just because. And the weird thing is, a lot of those people will follow you every night. They will tell you exactly why they hate you, because they just sit there like serial killers stalking their victims, watching everything you do every night, just hating you with every ounce of their metered by Nielsen TV viewing bodies. And you just have to kind of let that go.
Yeah.
And it's hard, because sometimes that was something that I really felt like management should have given us more instruction with, more leeway with. I don't know, because I got forwarded an email once from the news director, and it was from someone who was, it was like you said, was upset because we didn't cover something in our 140 high schools and 10 colleges that we cover. We missed something that we didn't know was going to happen, whatever it was. And so I took like 20 minutes to write an email back to this guy and explain everything. And then I asked the news director about it later, and he said, I didn't want you to respond. I just wanted to make sure you saw it. You don't have to talk to that guy. Well, how do you handle those things? The best way to do it is just to ignore them. And that's a lot easier said than done.
It is.
Because these people, they can get nasty sometimes. And you're not allowed to respond in the way that you would like to, or in the way that most normal human beings would do, which is either respond angrily or, block them and forward it to the authorities. You don't get to do that, because you still, even people who hate you count towards your TV ratings. So, and there were a lot of people that hated us for reasons like we didn't come to this game, or we didn't show this thing, or, and it's always the thing, something that's already happened. They don't tell us that it's going to happen so that we can be there. They just want to wait until it's over and then be angry about it. But that's the kind of thing that just happens. That, to me, I understand. But there are people who just hate you for no good reason whatsoever. And in radio, I was able to have some fun with some of those people. But in TV, no, I was not.
Yeah.
Don't feed the animals.
All right, so what have we learned today? Let's see. The schedule sucks. The money sucks. You have to deal with the viewers, which sucks even more now because there's such accessibility now. You're disposable. We knew that. You don't know shit until they tell it to you. We knew that. Those are some pretty good lessons. That about tells you the truth. Without getting into some, if I didn't want to burn a lot of bridges, I would tell some hella stories and I would name names. And I know you could too, but some of these people are my friends and a lot of them are still in the business and I would prefer not to do that. So I'm going to ask you one question before we wrap up here. I want you to name a couple of people that you worked with that you really liked working with. And this is not a knock against the people you don't name, but just some folks that you remember going, hey, I really enjoyed. You do it. You name a couple, and I'll name a couple. That way we're on the same page of who we had fun working with. That way nobody feels left out.
Okay. Radio, TV, or both?
Do television, because I think people are going to remember those folks probably a little bit.
Yeah, well, TV was a much bigger audience. Well, okay. It's one thing. Let me go back to something that you were saying and about the money is bad and all that. Yeah. One thing that means for you people out there who seem to hate your local TV people, their whole life is spent in transit.
Yeah.
Their whole life is high school, they go to college, they get whatever degree it is, journalism or whatever, and then they start on the path. And then they work in Lufkin, and they work in Tyler, and they work in Oklahoma City, and maybe they work in Las Vegas, and maybe they work their way up. And it takes years of their life. It's basically an apprenticeship where you have to do this and you have to keep moving. You don't buy a house until you reach the top. You spend however long your contract is, that is the exact amount of time you want to spend in this town, because like a baseball player, you want to move up and out of the minors and get to the majors. I mean, we both worked with a guy who's there now, Chesky. How he's great at what he does, and he has played the game the whole way. I hope he's doing better, feeling better out there. But that's what you have to do. So when you see these guys, basically they are sacrificing a big chunk of their lives to bring you the news, to bring you stories, to entertain and enlighten you about things that are going on. And again, none of this is involved in a 9 o'clock morning meeting about who can we screw this week on the stories.
I know more people who are not in television than I know that stayed in television.
Yes,
I think you
that
would
is
agree.
absolutely true.
All
And
right, so-
for the most part, I think they are all a lot happier when they realize that you can make the same or better money with less stress, with less letting people take a shot at you. Anybody with a keyboard can do that. With less morning meetings, with all of that. You don't. And when you hear a siren, you don't have to leave your family and go get in your car and
go figure out what it is. Yeah.
Yes. If it's not something that you absolutely love and you're willing to make that sacrifice for 10 to 15 years, then it's best to just get out. And I'm glad we both did.
Name for me a couple of people, maybe not like who you liked working with, but really like maybe influenced you in television, or fuck it. Who did you really like working with?
Well, I kind of said that last word because the morning meeting is just the worst thing in the world. It is for those of you who have never heard these stories, the morning meeting is where you pitch your ideas, and you have to have either 2 or 3 or sometimes 5 ideas that you can turn between 9 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock in the blessed afternoon entirely. You have to have all these stories set up of something that would be of interest to your viewers and exciting to people who don't know anything about it. And you have to have it all set up, whether or not they're going to tell you to go out and do it, because a lot of times they don't, and then you have to call those people back. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
You're just not interesting. I thought you were, but the morning meeting, I would, depending on who was running our meetings, that's where I really got to know people, and I would realize that there are some things that I just can't. Some ideas that I had, and I always had kind of goofy ideas, I can't pitch. Like our news director, Kenny, sort of got me. Joe Terrell, I love Joe. He understood me, and he understood what I wanted to do sometimes, and that I could not do it. But he turned me loose a lot. But I would pitch stuff to Clint Yates, and he would just, Clint did not get where I was going. So depending on who was running the show was what I got away with. And so that's where I kind of got to know those people. So you talk about people that influenced me in the TV thing. Joe did, because I could make Joe laugh.
Yeah.
Joe, when he was on the desk, when he was there at 6 and 10, and he was about 4 feet away from me, he would not read my material before I went on the air, and I could try to get him to laugh, like the old Carson show with Ed McMahon. If I could get Joe going, then the studio would laugh, then I would have an audience right there in the news. Kenny Bowles, our news director, I had many clashes with Kenny, and I talked about that after he passed away last year, I think. But that was the thing where we worked. They made you better. And Kenny did that. Kenny would explain things to me, not all the time, but he'd just occasionally come by and say, hey, like when you're doing your voice track for something, they're only going to hear this once. Make sure you hit the words you want them to remember. They bring in consultants, and every consultant would be good for like one thing in an hour, but they would at least try to make you better. And I see that a lot when you go to other cities. I go to see my mom and dad in Beaumont, and the Beaumont News there is, you can tell no one has ever sat down with those people, those reporters, and said, okay, this was good. Never do this again. Don't ever do this. Weather people, never put your hands together in front of the camera, because that's what we're looking at. Don't do that. That's there's a freebie. But those guys got me and helped me to figure out what was going on. Stephen Parr, I worked with. We both came in as reporters, and he wound up as a meteorologist, which shows you he's a lot smarter than I am. Parr and I had very similar senses of humor, and at one point, like grade school kids, they had forbidden us to sit together in the meetings. We were separated. Sports-wise, I already, by the time I got to TV and sports, I'd already been working in sports for 15, 18 years, something like that. But working with Michael Coleman was really something. It was really an eye-opener, because Coleman was just a performer. Mm-hmm. He could take nothing and just fascinate you with it. He still can. But no matter what went wrong, with his show. There was one time where when we were using tapes, Coleman went in to see the director and set his tapes down on the table behind him, and they couldn't find them. He didn't take them to the tape operator who actually runs them. He just set them down, and so they go upstairs, and Coleman, there's no tapes. So Coleman says, "Okay, just come to me." So they come to him, and he just did like a 3-minute sportscast, hilarious, interesting, no video, just him standing there. I mean, just brilliant stuff. And then working with Maya after that, after I came back the fourth and final time, that was one of the times I think that I had the best chemistry with somebody. We were on the same page all the time, or almost all the time, and we really got their money's worth out of the tiny amounts of money they were paying us. How about you? Like you started in Lufkin before that. What kind of things?
So
what kind of things inspired you?
Like I got my job in Lufkin when I was still in graduate school at Stephen F. Austin. So I was anchoring and working in television and going to school like I think I was twice a week, Tuesday, Thursday. So I had a lot going on there. But my first there's bugs flying around me. So my first sports director boss was Ryan Peterson, and he actually ended up being my boss for my entire career. And I say boss, we were partners, right? But he was technically the sports director. So Ryan Peterson was terrific to work with. The first anchor I ever worked with was Taylor Hemness, who I ended up working with for 6 years. All the people in Lufkin were just so terrific because we were all small market, right out of college. Like everybody was learning the ropes together. There were no egos yet, right? Like I used to work in market so-and-so. Like go fuck yourself. Like we didn't know those people yet. Like we didn't know any of those people. Everybody was young. Jessica Cervantes was young. I was young. Taylor had worked in Abilene and San Angelo. He was the big dick because he actually knew what television was. So everybody was asking him questions like, what in the hell is this? What is this? What is this? And how he didn't go insane in Lufkin working with us, I have no idea. But, Brad Lozak and Peterson and Taylor and I became really close down there in Lufkin. Three of us got moved up here. I got to work with, you and I didn't work together a long time, but we worked together. I worked with Maya briefly, but, I got a list here, like Morgan Chesky came along, and now he's an NBC national correspondent. He was terrific to work with. Joe Terrell, like you said. Molly Reuter was my first anchor up here that I got to work with, and she had to show me the ropes because I didn't know what the hell was going on. And so there were a lot of people. Skirto, who's still here, Michael Hetrick, who worked every single job at that station. So I look back, and I apologize if I left anybody out, but you work with so many people. And what was great about the small market, there were very few egos. We had some people who tried to swing it around and try to act like they were hot shit. We really did. But for the overwhelming majority of my career, most people were in it to learn the business, to work their ass off, and to do good by themselves in their station. I don't know if you get that at the bigger stations where people have egos and there's money and all pride. We had that, but it was on a far less scale. Don't you think?
Well, yeah, at that level, it's hard to have an ego because you haven't done anything yet, or you wouldn't be at that level. Yeah. And it's kind of the same way. There were some anchor conflicts. I'm not frozen. I'm just not saying anything because I think a lot of people will remember what I'm talking about. But there were some anchor conflicts. But the weird thing is, we would go out sometimes like on a Saturday night or to a party sometime in the off season, and we would run into other people from other stations who were at our level. And for the most part, we all got along. We're all in the same gang. We're all there is no union, but if there were, we would all be at the same meetings. Or maybe we all be at the same AA meetings. I don't know, because everybody lived under the same stress with the same awful money, with the same, you could be replaced at any time that you were talking about. We were all there. And even though we weren't in the same newsroom, everybody got it. I mean, a friend of mine up here knows a guy who's a reporter at one of the big Cincinnati stations. And I met him at a party, and 3 or 4 minutes, we're talking about how bad the morning meeting is, like how much of your life that takes away from you preparing for that. Some things, I guess, are universal.
Yeah. No, I get it. I cannot agree with you anymore. Hey, I met my wife. My wife worked at a competing station. Like, I know people at our station who were friendly with people at other stations. Like, hey, that's how it works, right? Like, because you all ran in the same crowd. You're so right. You went out together, you drank together, you saw each other, you saw the same people at every news conference, at every fire, at every sporting event. I would run into Julia Morales at every single sporting event. And now she's the lead reporter for the Houston Astros, right? Like, you just ran into these people all the time. And, sometimes it sparked, right? And your station would relate with people from the other station, and that's how that worked. But
sometimes
you're right.
Sometimes you guys marry and have kids, yeah.
And sometimes we marry and have kids. But I'll wrap it up with this because, if anybody has made it this far in our conversation, you should get a freaking gold star because, let's just face it. What do you take away from your time in television, from the local media aspect? What do you take your time?
What do I take personally, or how does that make me look at local media?
How about both? Can you answer both?
Okay, sure. I got this. I live in Kentucky. I literally have nothing else to do for the rest of the week, so we can stay as long as we have to. I am a lot more sympathetic to the media because, like I said, my degree is in computer science, and you would never want me to work on your computers. By the way, that was just. By the time I realized I didn't want to do it, I was way too far in and already working in radio to stop. So I never meant to be in local media. And even when I was in radio, I didn't see myself as being in local media because I was a little bit of a DJ, but I was mostly a sports guy. And I got to be a part of a lot of things. In radio, I got to cover a lot of great football games and a lot of great communities. Really as a part of it. Back when radio, if anybody under the age of 30 is listening to this, go to Wikipedia and look up radio. It was awesome, but it doesn't work anymore.
It's the thing you mute. It's the thing you mute in the car to turn on your podcast.
Exactly. Yes, that's it. But I understand more what they're trying to do. And when I got into television, I'd worked in radio forever. I'd been a writer forever. I had no idea what it took to put on a newscast, to put all those stories together, to produce them, to let them, to stack the rundown and let the show flow, or even just to put those stories together. And that was something that cable TV specifically taught me how to, our packages, which is the self-contained news story that you do. When they say, Reid Kerr's got more, boom, that's a package. And I think our packages for the most part were 1:15. That's all the time they gave you. And you have to realize that you are telling one story. You want your viewer to remember one thing. Don't overthink it. Don't give them too much. Give them more than that in the tag to the story. Now give them more than that online. But viewing, that's all they're going to see. And so I really respect people who are in the media who can do that effectively, who can tell a story. And there's a difference between telling me facts and explaining what's going on, and also telling me a story, bringing the human element of it in, showing you why something matters, showing you what emotional effect or any kind of effect really that a certain thing has on people. Because in the end, that's what it's all about. Stories can be data, but data is not it's not a heartwarming story. It won't interest anybody. You have, unemployment is up. Okay, show me somebody. Show me what that effect has. Take the big story, bring it down. I still now love to be able to see people do that. And when people rail against the media, I feel like people nowadays, not to get too large on this, but I feel like people have to blame somebody for things. And a faceless media conglomerate of everyone literally who's on the media is a good enough place to start for some people. But it's like you said, it's not true. We never sat around and said, all right, let's screw these people today on our newscast. Those people are out there, just like you said, not making much money, working their asses off to try to bring you the information that you need for your life. So that, to me, is one of the things I took away from being in the media. And I'm very glad it happened. Like I said, I never meant to be in television. As you can tell, I ain't going back. But I am very glad that I did so, to know that I can. The storytelling that I learned there has helped me in writing and in everything else. And it's just, it was a fun time in my life. It was not a profitable time in my life. It was not a stress-free time in my life. But it's one of those things that, and I bet you the same way, it's one of those things that people still remember about you, and you still kind of remember about yourself, that, hey, I did this, and when I was done with it, I walked away. And
Yep.
I don't have to do it again, but I'm glad I did it.
You know, I take away just a few things, but you're spot on. You know, I remember working with some phenomenal people that have gone on to incredible careers, both in television and not. But I think of like Taylor Hemness, who we mentioned, who is now a big time anchor in Kansas City, and Morgan Chesky, who's with NBC National. And there's some other folks who were in television and stayed, and there were some that got out and have very nice careers getting out. But I always remember the people I worked with, right? And you just like the stories you had together, because you were busting ass, making just enough money to survive, you know, eating shitty pizza on Friday night because Papa John sponsored the Red Zone. And, you know, like, but you remember those newsroom moments, right? You remember the newsroom and how much fun it was to be in the newsroom, and how worthwhile it was when you did a story and somebody, they either wrote in or maybe they called in or posted on Facebook and said, hey, we really enjoyed that. And you were like, you know what? That was awesome. That was worth it. I worked my ass off for a story. And if one person said, hey, that was cool, I like that, then I consider that a success.
Let me ask you this. Is there a big newsroom moment, big event that suddenly everything had to come together, either news or sports? Is there something like that for you that when you look back on your career just automatically pops up?
Yes. There are some newsroom moments that I will not mention here publicly. Some people are aware what some of those moments might be because you might have been involved with them or there. So I won't mention that. But I will say,
are we going to do like a podcast after dark thing where we talk about those? It's going to be pay-per-view.
Because that, I don't want to name names, but I remember some shit going down. But well, I remember Cody Lilich had convinced me the printer was voice programmed, and I was standing there yelling at the printer, print, motherfucker, print. And it wouldn't print, and it was on video, and they're dying laughing in the newsroom, and I about snapped. But it was a Red Zone night, and I didn't have time to go berserk on everybody because I had to get to the set. But every time a Friday night show went on the air, was above average or better, that was a miracle in and of itself. That all the video, all the scripts, and all the scores got in. That was a minor miracle every Friday night, but that was a true team effort because you had photographers, you had anchors, you had producers, you had graphic people, you had the shitty pizza in the newsroom. Like every Friday night show that ever went off without a hitch, it was a true testament to how good things could be.
Yes. The Red Zone, for those of you who are not in our area, was our Friday night. Was that 11:30 we did that?
Well, one year the salesperson popped in and said it had moved to 10:30. So it originally started out at 11:30. It followed Jimmy Kimmel, which was huge for us because Kimmel had a big audience, and 11:30 allowed people at away games to get back home. And then one year they moved it to 10:30, which we fought against. But like we said, you don't know shit until you know shit. Right. Things had been changed, and we were the last people to find out.
Yeah, and that show was great because everyone everybody from California to Florida knows about Texas high school football, and in East Texas, it is absolutely crazy. And that was a show where we would send, oh man, we would send, counting the two stations, Tyler and Lufkin, we would send like 13, 14 people out to shoot games, sometimes multiple football games, and get it all back, get it edited, get it on the air with sometimes seconds to spare for 10:30, 11:30 show, whatever it is. And I loved it because it was the only time that you knew people were watching you for sports.
Correct.
Every week. You know, you weren't just on the air and your directions were, okay, don't let anybody tune out before Wheel of Fortune comes on here in 2 minutes. They watched because they wanted to see the product, and we put a good product on the air. And that's those things are like, I wouldn't compare what we do to being at war, but in terms of a whole team effort coming together, like in a military fashion, that's where we were. Because some nights it was you were hoping to see headlights pulling into the parking lot at 11:25 with your game of the week that aired in about 2 minutes. So it was fun. I don't want to do it again.
No. It is 9:30 Central Time. If
10:30 Standard Time.
My math is correct. We've been talking for an hour, almost an hour. So I won't keep you up any longer. Folks, if you have made it this far, follow Reid on his – are you still writing?
Yeah, I'm still writing. My website is reidaboutit.com. It's REID aboutit.com. That's one of the good things is that nobody would pay attention to how my name was spelled, so all the angry emails never made it to me. But Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff, I'm there.
Follow Reid. Reid's Fistful of Sports, I believe, is the Facebook page.
There's one of those, yes. I'm very fractured. I got a lot of places. So. Full
of comedy and satirical things going on. And folks, if you have made it this far, like and subscribe. If this reaches 200 views by the end of the month, and I'll try to post this soon, we will do a part 2. Not you and I, but I'll get another has-been. And we will do a part 2. And maybe I'll find somebody, and we'll talk more shit about people. But we're not going to name names. I think we kept it pretty positive tonight, right?
Yes.
I think we kept it pretty positive tonight. So, folks, I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Reid and I go way back to the time when I took his job. That was awesome.
Right.
We had an awkward exchange. We had an awkward exchange on the air where he passed the torch to me, and I was like, "See you, bruh." And then he became some kind of internet star, kinda. And then he moved to Kentucky. That about sums it up.
Other things happen, but yeah, that's the gist of it. That's the tweet of my life at this point. So it's been a pleasure, Coleman. I appreciate you inviting me on.
Well, I'm gonna stop recording, and if the computer doesn't freeze up while it renders all of this, we'll have it up soon, folks. We appreciate you watching. Reid, buddy, man, I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on.
Anytime, Coleman. Thanks, brother.
See ya, Haas. See ya, everybody.
Shut up and sit down.